When I was little, my parents would send me to my grandparents' farm in Pennsylvania for 2 weeks every summer. The house sat on 40 acres of mostly woods. It was honestly more woods than farm. My cousin Francisco would come for different weeks because our parents wanted to give our grandparents a break between visits. I always went first 2 weeks of July. He always went last 2 weeks of August. The house had 3 floors, but the 3rd floor was just an attic with one finished room that used to be my dad's when he was my age. That's where I slept. The ceiling slanted down on both sides, and there was one window that overlooked the backyard into the woods. My grandparents went to bed early, usually before 9 o'clock. My parents told me it was rude to stay up past them, so I'd stay in my room after they wished me goodnight. I wouldn't sleep, though. I would stay up reading with a flashlight or playing my Game Boy. There wasn't much else to do there. The first summer went by without incident, but I started noticing weird things the second summer I was there. On one of the first nights, I was reading in bed when I heard footsteps on the attic stairs. They sounded soft, like someone was trying to be quiet. I watched as the door handle turned and pushed open about 6 inches. As soon as I saw the door opening, I shut my light off and pretended to be asleep. I honestly thought it was my grandma coming to check on me, and I was worried that I'd get in trouble if she found out I was awake. But I didn't hear anything after that. No receding footsteps or the sound of the door closing. I forced myself to sleep, assuming I had either missed my grandma leaving or she was still watching me for whatever reason. The next morning, I told my grandpa about the footsteps. He said the house was old and made noises, and that raccoons sometimes got in the walls. I thought that was an especially strange explanation, because I was pretty sure I had seen the door handle turn. But I didn't want to say that the footsteps were far too soft to be his anyway. So I just assumed it was my grandma, and he wasn't actually aware of it. 3 nights later, I woke up. Or at least I thought I woke up, because my bed was shaking. There was someone standing at the foot of my bed. It was dark, but I could see their outline. I couldn't tell which of my grandparents it was, but it still scared me nonetheless. I closed my eyes and silently counted to 100. When I opened them, the person was gone. I convinced myself it had just been a nightmare, but it didn't feel like one. When I woke up the next morning, my closet door was open, even though I knew it had been closed the night before, which made me doubt whether I had truly been asleep. I started suspecting my grandma was spying on me while I was asleep, as stupid as that sounds. It was the only explanation that made sense to me. Elderly people don't always have the best control over their minds, after all. It was scary, but I didn't want to bring it up to my grandparents again, out of fear of upsetting or disrespecting them. Similar things happened periodically over the course of that week and the next. And when it came time to go home, I was relieved. When my mom picked me up, I told her everything. She laughed and said it was impossible to get my grandma out of bed after she fell asleep. Then she told me I had an active imagination and that old houses were creepy. She said Francisco never complained about anything when he stayed there. That made me feel like maybe I really was just imagining things. I went back the next summer, and the same things happened. I never actually saw my grandma's face, but I knew it was her. I started going to sleep much earlier to reduce the risk of being awake for something creepy to happen. Years went by. My parents stopped sending me to my grandparents' farm after a certain age, and a big part of me was relieved. My grandparents passed away when I was in college, within mere weeks of each other. The funeral was the most depressing thing ever. Besides how sad it was, I had to converse with a bunch of relatives I hadn't seen in years, which I wasn't thrilled about. One such relative was Francisco, who I actually hadn't interacted with much, even though we were around the same age. It took less than a minute for me to realize I had nothing in common with him. Besides our age, the only thing we really did have in common was our shared time at the farm. So I asked him about it, not really knowing what else to talk about, and feeling like something related to our grandparents was a valid topic of conversation. I told him about what I had experienced there. The footsteps, the figure, the closet door. I even told my theory about it being our grandma. I expected him to laugh or maybe agree with me, but I was wrong. With a blank expression, he said, "And I'll never forget this. That's nothing. That thing used to touch me." I listened in horror as he described things that were categorically worse than what I had experienced. He said the same figure would stand at the foot of his bed every few nights, but it didn't just watch him like it watched me. He would feel the mattress sink down like it was sitting. Then he would feel fingers on his face tracing his features. Sometimes it would grab his wrist and hold it. He said he kept his eyes shut and remained frozen in place until it left. I asked him how he knew it wasn't one of our grandparents, and he said, almost like it was obvious that he could feel it, that the thing that was touching him had rough and scratchy hands, unlike either of our grandparents. I looked at him in shock. I genuinely couldn't believe what he was telling me. Why would he keep something like that to himself? I asked him that, and he said he didn't, that he told his mom about the occurrences several times. She didn't believe him and actually got mad when he'd complained about it to her. So he stopped talking about it and told himself that as long as he kept his eyes closed and didn't move, everything would be okay. Hearing him tell me that was quite literally horrifying. Not only did it confirm everything I myself had been experiencing, but it made things so much worse. Francisco and I stopped talking about it after that, and I could tell both of us just wanted to forget about the shared nightmare and leave it in the past with the rest of our childhood. But if it wasn't my grandma who was coming into my room at night, I don't like thinking about what it could mean. The way Francisco described it as a thing is something that still freaks me out. But is it any better thinking about how it might have been a human being? That would mean there was a person my grandparents didn't know about living in their house for years. I don't know which is worse. When I was 9 years old, I lived with my parents in a narrow townhouse squeezed between two identical buildings. My bedroom was on the 3rd floor with a window that looked directly into the house behind ours. The houses were so close that I could see straight into the room across from mine, which was maybe 20 feet away at most. For the longest time, there was never anyone in the window, but I used to look through it every so often out of curiosity. Anyway, one day, there actually was someone in the window. It was a girl. She looked to be about my age, with dark hair and a ponytail. The other thing I remember about her was that she was wearing a yellow sweater. She waved at me, and I waved back. Then, she stepped out of the frame of the window. After that, we would wave every day after I got home from school. She was always there at 3:30 like she was waiting, and she always wore the same yellow sweater. We played games through the windows. She would hold up drawings and I would guess what they were. I would show her my homework and she would give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. On warm days, I would open my window and try talking to her, but she never opened hers. She would just smile and point to her ear like she couldn't hear through the glass. I figured her parents were strict about keeping the windows closed. One day, I asked my mom about the girl. My mom said the Murphys lived there, an older couple with no kids. I told her about the girl, and she said maybe they had a granddaughter visiting. That made me kind of sad because it meant she would probably disappear one day. But she didn't. She was there almost every day at around exactly the same time, and we played our games for 30 minutes to an hour before she would walk out of view. A few weeks later, I woke up around 2 a.m. to tapping. I walked over to my window and realized it was the girl. She was at her window, which was strange because I had never seen her at any time other than right after school. She wasn't smiling like she normally was. She pointed down at something I couldn't see and put her hands together like she was begging. I didn't know what she wanted, but it started to scare me, so I crawled back into bed. The tapping continued for a few more minutes and then stopped. She wasn't at the window for 3 days after that. I started thinking I had upset her by ignoring her that night. But then, on the 4th night, the tapping woke me again. This time, she was pressing both hands against the glass. Her mouth was moving like she was saying something, but I wasn't able to hear her since her window was closed. Her breath fogged up the window, which was strange because it was the middle of May and warm. She kept mouthing the same words. It honestly looked like she was saying, "Help me." Then she stepped back, and I saw something that made me freak out. There was a dark stain on her yellow sweater, like a blotch of paint or mud. I ran to my parents' room, almost crying. My dad ran to my room and looked out my window, but the light was off, and the girl wasn't in the window anymore. My parents convinced me it was just a nightmare and told me to go back to sleep. The next afternoon, after the girl didn't show up in the window, I climbed our back fence and saw Mrs. Murphy in her garden. I smiled and waved, and she looked happy to see me, even though we had never met. I asked her about the girl in the 3rd floor room. She stopped smiling, sat down her watering can, and walked a little closer to the fence. The way she stopped smiling so abruptly kind of scared me. She asked how long I had been seeing her. I told her a few weeks. She asked what this little girl looked like, and I described her dark hair and yellow sweater, and how she never opened her window. Then, Miss Murphy told me to go back inside. I thought I was in trouble. Things changed a lot after that day. I was pretty sure Mrs. Murphy called my mom, which made me think I was in trouble even more. My parents moved my bed to the opposite wall that same night. They hung thick curtains over my window, the heavy kind that blocked all the light. When I asked why, they said it was to help me sleep better. But I knew something was wrong. The next day, on the way home from school, my mom told me I couldn't play the waving game anymore. When I asked why, she just said I was too old for imaginary friends. I told her she wasn't imaginary, that I had seen her for months. My mom just repeated that I couldn't go to the window anymore. I was so confused and honestly hurt. No one would explain anything to me. My friend was gone. She never appeared in the window again. My parents acted like I had done something wrong by seeing her. Not like I could express my feelings to them anyway. I was disobeying them by just going to the window in the first place. We moved like a year later. It wasn't until I was in high school that my mom finally explained things to me. Or more specifically, what Mrs. Murphy had told her. Apparently, the previous owners had a daughter named Jenna. She was 11 when she was hit by a car right in front of the house. It happened just after school, and she was wearing a yellow sweater on that faithful day. The family moved out shortly after. When the Murphys bought the house, they tried to use that 3rd floor room, but ended up sealing it completely after things kept happening. My mom didn't really elaborate on that part. I don't think she knew. She just said that Mrs. Murphy had always been very spiritual. I'm 34 now. I live in a house with no windows facing other buildings. That's not an accident. I developed a kind of phobia for windows, reflective surfaces too. I've had a couple dreams about that girl in the window over the years. It's never a bad dream. I never see her with a stain on her sweater like I had that one night. But she doesn't smile in my dreams like she used to smile at me. This will forever be one of those freaky experiences that just doesn't have an explanation.
If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe for more weekly horror. On screen now is the most recent upload and the most viewed story on the channel. Pick your next one carefully, and remember, some stories are better not listened to alone.